Hello and welcome to Veg Around the World. My name is Meenakshi Garodia and I believe in simple recipes, authentic taste. Today we're going to take one country at a time in the show, and today we're taking India. We're going to make a complete meal. I've got some very exciting dishes for you and very easy, something you can easily make at home. I've tried to keep the spices and the ingredients to a minimum, and all the ingredients are authentic to the country, to the sub-region, South Asia, so that you can, most of them you can find in your local grocery store. We're going to start off with chickpea flour pancake with a mango mint chutney for an appetizer. Then we're going to have chickpeas with rice for the main dish and a rice pudding for dessert, and accompanied with, of course, mango lassi. So here we go. I wanted to introduce some of the spices we're going to use today. We have garam masala. Now garam masala is like the king of all spices in India. It's a blend of some very exciting things. It has cumin, coriander, cinnamon, a bunch of things, black pepper, cardamom, cloves. We're going to use some of this. Now, if you only wanted to buy one Indian spice, buy this. Next is cumin powder. We use cumin powder and cumin seeds interchangeably. I like using cumin seeds better because sometimes I don't like it when we get too much of the seed in your mouth. Then we have coriander powder. So the cilantro, it's also called coriander, and the seeds can be ground up for coriander powder. And you should smell these. These are like just wonderful to smell. We're going to use salt, sugar, ginger. I've got crushed ginger, crushed garlic. And that's pretty much it. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with the dishes that take the longest to cook, and that's the chickpeas as well as the rice pudding. So for the chickpeas, we start off, you start off the burner, let your pan get a little hot. I like to measure my fat content so that my food's as healthy as it can be. You take 1 tablespoon of oil, and you let it get heated up. Now the ingredients in the chickpea is going to be onions, tomatoes, chickpeas, and spices. That's it. You can actually make it in two ways. You can actually make it as either more like a stew or more like just chickpeas by itself. If you want a more gravy kind of chickpea, then you grind your onions and tomatoes. But if you want it more like a stew, really rich and hearty, then I just chop it. Today I've chopped it because I personally like the hearty flavor of the tomatoes and onions when they come in. So for that, I just need like 1 onion. I've already pre-cut it, but it's just 1 onion. And for tomatoes, I just buy a can. I buy diced tomatoes, it's easy. And 1 can of garbanzo. The spices we're going to use, that's about it. So I'm going to start off by putting in the onions. You can hear the nice little sizzle. And you just give it a little stir. It's okay to keep it at high right in the beginning, even if this is an electric stove, because till there's enough fat and onion in it, it's once you put the spices in that you need to turn the heat down. If you keep the heat up with the spices, it will tend to like stick at the bottom, and that's not really tasty. So now that this is on, I wanted to start with the rice pudding and the rice. Now there are 2 ways you can make rice pudding. You can actually cook the rice in water and then add it to milk, or you can cook it in milk. A lot of people cook it in milk, but personally, I do a combination of both. I cook it for a little bit in water and then I transfer it to milk. So I have half a cup of rice. Now I like to use basmati rice. It's easy. The important thing about rice is that you should soak it overnight if you can, or at least for 2 hours, because especially basmati rice, it's a long grain rice, and for the flavor to come out, for it to be fluffy, it needs to be soaked. I don't really know the chemistry behind it. It would be interesting to know, but that's about it. So I soaked 2 half cups of rice, 1 to eat with the chickpeas and the other to make the rice pudding with. You just wash your rice and take approximately 2 or 3 times the water. And I have a little bowl here. Oh, here it is. Obviously, I need a little more. Great. I make rice pudding in a microwave because otherwise you seriously need to stand and stir it the whole time. And that's just too labor intensive for me. I'm going to cook this for 10 minutes. There it goes. Every time you come near your chickpeas, it's always a good idea to give it a little stir to see how it's doing. And this seems to be doing really well. But I'm going to turn the heat down. I think the heat's a bit too much. Now that this is done, I'm going to add the spices. The spices are really simple. You start with cumin. You put 1 teaspoon of cumin. And you put 1.5 teaspoons of coriander powder. One teaspoon of garam masala. 1 tablespoon, actually 1.5 tablespoons of ginger. And 1 tablespoon of garlic. Give it a nice stir and you can just smell all the spices and it already smells so delicious. Now you leave this on just for a few minutes before we add the tomato. Meanwhile, let's get the rice started. Now it's actually quite difficult to make good rice. The trick is you need to be very gentle with long grain basmati because you can look at it. It's very different from the normal rice you get in the market. The normal rice is short and it's thick. This is long and fine. So now that it's been soaked for a while, it's good to go. The proportion I take, because I like my rice a little bit wet, is I take 1 rice as to 2 water. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to measure it to make sure I get the right proportion. It's important to make really good rice, it's important to have the right proportion of water to rice. So this is approximately like 1. So 2 more. That's good. Now, one of the tricks to making really good rice is adding a little fat to it. I personally like to add the Indian ghee or butter. And you just need a little bit, but what it does is it keeps the grains separate. And it stops it from becoming mushy. Like very often Asian rice is mushy. This will stop it from becoming mushy. So you put it in, and you put it on, and you put it at a high heat. It doesn't matter if it's a high heat. It's just fine with it, no problem. So I'll put it at 7. Essentially for rice, you let it come to a rolling boil, and then you turn it off and you cover it, and you're done. That's it. That's all you need to do. Okay. Because this is electric, or if you're cooking at home, make sure that you keep giving it a good stir every once in a while. Can you see the fragrant aroma coming up because of the spices? At this stage, when you feel your onions are getting a little bit pink, add the can of tomatoes. So tomatoes, the quantity of tomatoes really depends upon how you like it. I like a hearty stew, so I put the whole can, but you can easily put half a can and it'll taste phenomenal. Give it a good stir. Get the bottom, make sure it's not sticky at the bottom because that part will burn if you let it stick at the bottom. And now we can just cover it and let it be for a little bit. So out of our 6 dishes, actually, we're going to be making 6 dishes. We've got our rice pudding going, we've got our chickpeas going, we've got our rice going. What's left is, let's start with the mango lassi. I'm going to use a blender for it. That's the easiest way to make it. Now, for the mango, you can actually use a fresh mango. But personally, my favorite mango of all times is something called an Alfonso, which is really, really good. If you can get a can somewhere, if your local Indian grocery store carries it, I would recommend you get this. So for the mango lassi, put in, I don't take the syrup, but the mango is already sweet. So I take around 4 to 5 pieces of mango, If you're making it from a fresh mango, take maybe 2 mangoes, because you know with the seeds you might not get that much. Then take half a cup of yogurt, 3/4 of a cup actually. What's interesting is a lot of people think that cooking is a very exact science. I actually don't believe in that. I believe cooking should be fun, and you should just do it the way you want to do it. And it should just be fun. You should not be stressed out about cooking. It should be something enjoyable, because you're making food, and hey, maybe the first time the food won't come out the way you wanted it to, but the next time it will. And it's fun. I mean, if you get stressed out about it, it's no longer fun, and it becomes something you have to do. This is something you should want to do. Now, put an equal amount of milk as you put yogurt. This is one way of making it. Another way of making it is you use buttermilk from the market. I personally prefer the consistency of this because buttermilk's a bit too soft for me sometimes. And again, this is the consistency I like. You can just play around with the consistency to make it a consistency you like. If you think this one is going to be too thick for you or too thin for you, just change it. So give me a minute while I go blend it up. I'll just be back. Well, I'm back and your mango lassi is actually ready. So I like to decorate it with a little bit of mint. Now mint is one of my favorite spices to use. I have some mint here for the mango mint chutney, so it works perfectly. You just decorate a little bit on the side and you keep it aside for when we're actually having a meal. The next thing, again, always give your chickpea stew a stir to make sure that it's going well. This smells good. Actually, at this stage, because the tomato is pretty well cooked, I'm just going to go ahead and add the chickpeas. Give it a good stir. And I'm going to add a cupful of water. If you want a stew in chickpeas or lentils or anything that in this family, beans, if you have a slow cooker or a pressure cooker and you cook it with the spices, it's always going to be tastier because the softer these things are, the better the taste. But otherwise, just put enough liquid in it and let it slow cook. Put it on a medium heat or a low heat and just let it go for a while. It will fill your house with a really delicious aroma, and you'll also have really good taste at the end of it. So I'm just going to cover it and let it cook for a bit. Meanwhile, if you look at this rice is, it's delicious. So I'm just going to turn this off and cover it. The rice is done. What's left now? Now we have a mango mint chutney, which is what I'm going to go with next. It's really my favorite chutney to have. I'm just going to go clean this and I'm going to be right back. Well, I'm back. So while I'm making this chutney, I'm just going to tell you something that's so interesting to me. Now, a lot of people are scared of spices. Now, spicy doesn't necessarily mean hot. It just means something which has a spice in it, and normally every spice that we use has a quality that makes your digestion better, your breath better. I mean, there are all sorts of uses. It's very interesting to look up. So for the mango mint chutney, I'm going to take around 4 pieces of the mango, and I don't use the syrup. I actually do use the syrup sometimes for like mango juice if I'm making something else, but not anything here. Now I took 2 bunches of mint and I cleaned them, and I don't really, I don't keep the thick stems, but the thinner stems, it's fine. So you put in 2 bunches of mint. I'm just going to keep a few sprigs aside for decoration later. I always like to decorate my food with a little bit of mint or a little bit of coriander. Coriander goes really well with Indian food, like actual coriander leaves. And normally white wine goes really well with Indian food because it's so rich and it's so earthy that white wine will bring out the flavors better. And sometimes you need that little respite after you've had something really hot. And you put in 1 tablespoon of garlic. I know garlic in the chutney, but it tastes really good. And put in around half a cup of water. We might add more water later. It's just sometimes different blenders take different amounts of water. So I'm just going to blend this and be right back. Well, I'm back with this fabulous mango chutney. I actually sometimes will add a green chili to it. Today I haven't because these chilies are killers. But if you have the spice tolerance, add a chili. I would recommend that. This smells pretty good. You should take a look at it. Look at the rich color, and mint is good for you, garlic is good for you, and mango is delicious. Let's give our chickpeas a stir. It looks good. It looks really good. Meanwhile, our rice pudding, what we do is, the rice is half cooked now. So what we're going to do is we're going to drain this water, and I'm going to use a spatula for that to help me with that. I love the smell of cooking rice. It never gets old. I grew up having rice pudding, which was purely cooked in milk. But somehow for me, it was just, I don't like that little grainy feel of rice pudding you get. I like it really soft. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3 cups of milk for that 1 cup of, for that half a cup of rice, because a lot of milk gets used up. I prefer using whole milk, but I've actually made this with skim milk. It tastes pretty good too. Sometimes, depending on your microwave, you may need to add more milk. You never need to add less milk, because what happens is when it comes out of the microwave, it's really steaming hot, and over time it just becomes too dry then. So it's better to have it more liquidy than less liquidy. I'm going to start it off for another 10 minutes. Great. Now I'm going to make one of the last dishes remaining, which is the chickpea flour. Now chickpea flour is one of the most common things eaten in India. It's called besan. And I got a pack here just to show you what it looks like. You get it in the Indian store. I'm not sure you can get this in your local grocery, but it is just so delicious that I had to share it with you, because it's also the easiest thing to make. This is the chickpea flour. We'll just take one of our bowls. I like reusing things, instead of using 100 things, I just use a few things. So I'm going to take 2/3 of a cup of chickpea flour. I'm going to add just some garam masala in it. You don't really need too much. You can actually, what tastes really good with this is cilantro leaves or onions. Sometimes I added, whatever you feel like adding actually. And I'm going to add just a little bit of garlic, not garlic, ginger, sorry. And salt. Salt is one of the most essential. If you don't put enough salt, it really won't taste nice. So I'm putting a teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to put a little bit of baking soda. The baking soda actually helps it become really fluffy like a regular pancake. And you don't have to put it, but I just like the texture much better. So maybe half a spoon of baking soda. Take a little whisk. Now you put an equal amount of water. So I'll put 2/3, actually slightly more than an equal amount of water. So I'm going to put 2/3 of it. And give it a little whisk. Besan or chickpea flour tends to be a little bit lumpy, but that's okay. It doesn't taste bad. If you add less water at a time in the beginning, then it's better. Now, this is still a bit too dry, so I'm going to actually add some more water because I don't like them very thick. If you prefer yours thick, go ahead. I don't think there's any absolute in cooking. So much of cooking is your taste that you need to adapt your recipes to what you like. And the way you do that is you try once, you say, hey, maybe I wanted that slightly different, and next time you do it slightly different. It works out. At least that's how I learned cooking. You know, I didn't learn cooking till I was 25, and I didn't even think I enjoyed cooking, but it's so much fun and it's so experimental. It's like art, it's not like anything else. Okay, another stir to the chickpeas. So one of the things you can also do with the chickpeas is mash them in. So that's one of the things a slow cooker or a pressure cooker does, is your chickpea disintegrates. And the more you cook a lentil or a chickpea or a bean, it absorbs all the flavors. So the more you can, if you mash it, it sort of is a bit like the flavor goes in. I think we're going to be shutting this in another 5 minutes or so. This looks pretty good. So now, just about when you're ready to eat, we're going to make the chickpea pancake because that should be eaten hot. So I'm just going to keep that aside while we're waiting for everything to be ready. And we're just going to take a break and come right back. And I'm back. So I'm just going to take another look at the chickpea. Maybe I'm going to turn the gas off. Let's take a look. This is just right, and it's done. I don't like it totally dry, but I do like it a little bit dry so that it tastes. I don't like it very liquidy because when it's really dry, all the spices sort of like get concentrated. And if it's very liquidy, what happens is the spice stays in the liquid part, and when you're having the bean, that almost tastes bland. So that's why I always dry it down a bit. And this is done, so I'm going to turn this off. Now it's time to check on the rice pudding. Let's give it a little stir. At this point, it's too hot and I cannot hold it with my bare hands. So I will be there. It looks good, but it still needs to be done. It's not done enough. So I'm going to let it go for another 10 minutes or so. So I'm just going to take this time to take a little break, clear up a little bit, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. So now for the rice pudding, you can actually have a bunch of flavors, whatever flavors you want. People put nutmeg. Even in India, people put raisins, they put nuts. I personally just like it very mildly flavored. It's strong but mild. It's with cardamom. So I have some cardamom here, cardamom pods. What I do is we'll just open them out. Just 4 or 5, not too many, because you don't use the peel. Now the one thing which is interesting is you don't cook rice pudding with cardamom inside it. It can very often get bitter. So you should just, if you're cooking it and it's really hot, so at the point that you stop cooking it, you just add it. And I'm going to use around 4 or 5 because that's a lot of, despite it being just half a cup of rice, that's a lot of rice pudding. So what's also interesting is, all the recipes we're making today, you can easily substitute stuff. What is really good with rice pudding is instead of rice pudding, you can use rice noodles, you can use wheat noodles, you can use semolina, you can use whatever you feel like, just try it out. And for the chickpeas, I've actually used this recipe for red beans, for lentils, for a bunch of stuff, and it comes out really good. Now, for the chickpeas, the one thing which we haven't added yet, which actually you might want to add earlier, and the secret trick when you're making something really spicy, is to add half a spoon of sugar. You don't taste that sugar. That's the secret ingredient in any of these dishes. But what happens is it really rounds off that flavor. Now, normally I add red chili too, but red chili makes it really hot. But especially if you ever add red chili to anything, you should add just a little bit of sugar. That, when you go to restaurants and you have that finished flavor, very often that's a little bit of sugar in it. That's a little secret trick. And here I am peeling away my cardamom pods. The other flavor I'm going to put in the rice pudding is saffron. It's so interesting. Sometimes I sit and I wonder, I'm like, who would have thought, hey, there's this plant and yet let's use the pistils in that. It gives this beautiful color and aroma. And now like this little thing is so expensive, but it's very tasty and you can understand why. In India, very often in sweets, they actually use silver and gold. They flatten it out, mash it, make these thin layers, and they decorate it with that. Especially in weddings and all that, it's a very standard thing. So I'm just going to take a pinch of saffron. I'm going to add a dash of milk. And I'm going to let it sit, and I'm going to heat it up in a bit. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and crush the cardamom. You can actually buy cardamom powder too. I sometimes do that. Sometimes I like crushing it because it takes the frustration out of the day. You take it and you bang something hard. It's fun. Try it. Meanwhile, I'm also going to start because our food's almost ready. We'll be ready in less than 5 minutes. I'm going to start heating this pan. And we're going to let it get really hot. And we're just going to put a little bit of oil in it to coat it so that it doesn't stick when we're actually putting the pancake on, even though we're going to wipe it down a bit. Okay, that's good. Now the rice pudding beeped, so let's pull it out. It should be done by now. It does look done. This smells good. And this is so much easier making it in a microwave than standing, because whether you make it on a gas or an electric stove, rice pudding sticks. It's like the stickiest bugger ever. The secret trick to the rice pudding, condensed milk. Just put a can of condensed milk. You don't need sugar. You don't need anything. Just put a whole can. I know this is very rich, but you're not supposed to eat it like a meal. You're supposed to eat it as a dessert. Think of it as a really rich piece of chocolate. Take a small bit at a time. You make it, you share it with your friends, they'll love you for it. It's interesting, a lot of people's childhood memories are associated with rice and rice pudding. And you have a rice pudding kind of dish in so many cultures. You have it in India, obviously. You have it in America. You have it in Europe. You have it in Russia. There. This seems liquidy to you, and it is liquidy right now. But what's going to happen is very soon it will evaporate with the. You can see the steam rising from it. Now go ahead and add the cardamom powder at this stage. Give it a good whisk. If you smell, you should smell this. This smells good. Hopefully you like cardamom. Now, meanwhile, if you look at this is looking so good. You can see the color of the saffron starting to mix in the milk. Let's heat it a bit. Meanwhile, this is not that hot yet. Let it become a little bit hotter. I'm going to give another whisk to my mixture because it's been lying here for a bit. I'm making it a bit mild right now because everything else is so spicy. And we're also going to be having it with the mango mint chutney, which is really rich. And this tastes really good with mango mint because you can make actually 2-3 different types of chutneys. You should try it. You can use coriander instead of mint. You can use some other fruit, an apple. It'll taste nice. This is good. I'm going to just go ahead and take a ladleful, and just like regular pancakes, you just put it and you spread it out. let it go. This is done. This is really, really hot. So we're going to go ahead and let it cool down a little bit, then we'll be adding it to our rice pudding. Meanwhile, let's check on this. This is good. Now, you know there was already a little oil, so just make the oil go around. I'll make it a little bit hotter. It should be hotter than this. Okay, great. And I'll just do that. Well, I'm back. So this has cooled down, so let's go ahead and add it to our, and what I do is I just put it in a little bit, push it around, make sure I get all of it, because you don't want to lose any of that saffron. Now you can see the colors change just a little bit, and that's more than enough, because that's what you really want. You just want it a little bit. Now let me go ahead and scoop this out, and we're going to just serve it in this, because again, as I said, it's really rich. So you don't want it to be. Oh, and this looks really well done too. I'll be right back. And I'm back, and we flip it. It should be this color, this really golden, rich golden color, where it looks really nice. And you know, if you ever have a falafel, that's basically fried chickpeas too. So this is a little bit like fried chickpea pancake. There, this looks good. Let me dish it up. So I'm going to dish this up. Turn off the heater, and we'll take a little bit of the mango chutney with it, mango mint chutney. And the last thing left to do is to dish up our main dish. The way I like to do it is, let's give this a nice little stir, and we'll put some of it in the middle. And we take the rice, which you can see is cooked perfectly. That's a foolproof way of making rice. And you take it and you serve it around it. A little decorative way. A little circle of rice around it. And we top it off with a little sprig of mint. And our complete meal is ready. You start off with your appetizer, which is a chickpea flour pancake with a mango mint chutney. You have your main dish, which is rice with a chickpea stew. You have some delicious rice pudding and a mango lassi to go with everything. Bon appetit, and hope you have fun. Again, this is Veg Around the World, and we will explore vegetarian, tasty vegetarian cuisine from around the world. Goodbye.